In the last 50 years, over $1.2 trillion of foreign aid has been poured into Africa. That is more than the entire economic output of countries like Spain, Australia, or South Korea. By the 1980s and 90s, a powerful public narrative had taken hold. Western governments and citizens largely agreed that poverty on the continent was simply a math problem. They didn't have enough money, and the world just needed to give them more. This belief quickly morphed into a global moral crusade. Ordinary citizens donated millions, while mass-market charity singles and celebrity-driven campaigns turned the push for aid into a worldwide cultural movement. This chart shows the result. While the volume of Western aid skyrocketed, the extreme poverty rate in Africa simultaneously climbed from 11% all the way up to 66% by the 1990s. The fact that $1.2 trillion in aid coincided with a collapse into poverty reveals that the aid model itself is the source of the failure. The idea that massive cash injections fix poverty actually comes from the years right after World War II, driven by the success of the Marshall Plan in Europe. Between 1948 and 1952, the United States pumped the modern equivalent of $160 billion into Western Europe. In a single decade, the region's GDP per capita grew by nearly 35%. But Europe already possessed the infrastructure of functioning states. Their ministries, legal systems, and property rights were damaged but intact. When newly independent African nations received similar aid, they inherited colonial institutions that were designed for one specific purpose: extracting wealth for the ruling elite. Applying a European reconstruction blueprint to a post-colonial environment failed to trigger an economic boom. Instead, it built the foundation for a decades-long humanitarian collapse. The first major mechanism of harm happens at the highest levels of government. Foreign aid dismantles political accountability. In a functioning democracy, citizens pay taxes to the state, which returns that wealth as public services. Foreign aid breaks this loop. Overseas cash drops directly into the government, bypassing taxpayers completely. Take Malawi in the early 2000s, where foreign aid made up 40%. Local businesses simply cannot compete with free. Between 1990 and 2010, 80% of Ghana's domestic textile factories were forced to shut their doors permanently. This dynamic extends far beyond clothing. Over the last 2 decades, the African continent has actively de-industrialized. The manufacturing sector has shrunk from 15% of the economy down to just 10%. That ensures the goods these nations produce are irresistibly cheap for global buyers. Aid reverses this. By forcing billions of foreign dollars to convert into the local economy, it artificially drives up the local currency's value. This makes African-produced goods too expensive for the global market, killing foreign demand instantly. By artificially inflating exchange rates, foreign aid mathematically locks African nations out of the exact export-driven strategy that built the modern Asian economies. This creates a landscape of failing projects. Studies show that up to 70% of foreign aid projects either fail to meet their targets entirely or have zero measurable impact. In a functional market, a business that provides a terrible product quickly loses its customers and goes bankrupt. But the foreign aid industry has no mechanism to punish failure. Since the funding originates overseas, local citizens cannot defund a useless project or vote out the people running it. Despite this track record, global entities remain detached from the reality. International summits consistently end with promises to double aid budgets, pouring more cash into the same broken systems. Without consumer market feedback or taxpayer accountability, the aid industry perpetually subsidizes its own failures, trapped in a loop of good intentions and deeply harmful outcomes. This doesn't mean foreign aid has no role to play. It is highly effective for short-term emergency relief during acute crises, like natural disasters, famines, and conflicts. But while emergency relief saves lives, it is fundamentally incapable of acting as a long-term economic growth strategy. If the West truly wants to see a wealthy, independent Africa, the international community has to stop treating the continent as a charity case. Sustainable growth requires a total shift in focus, supporting local entrepreneurship, building strong domestic institutions, and embracing export-led industrialization. The cycle of extreme poverty will only end when the cycle of dependency is broken. Once that happens, governments will finally be forced to answer to their own citizens rather than foreign donors.